So I did Zoom control. Just their video. Oh, no, that's their choice. You don't have to do it next. No, yeah, that's their choice, the way it is. Yeah.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming out for the Templetown School Forum. My name's Pam Kingston. I am one of the committee members of the School Study Committee that our selectmen formed late spring, early summer this year after last year's warrant article to close the elementary schools. And our purpose, guiding purpose, was to look at cost savings in our district without having to close our elementary schools. However, if it led to us possibly considering doing what Francistown and Dublin has, it was not our first purpose by any means, but the selectmen said if it led to that, then we may end up going down that route. But tonight, we're here just to present what we've done so far to date. And I'd like to introduce the members of the committee. We have Vivian, Gail, Michelle, and Carol. And if anyone would like to join, we could certainly use extra hands to tackle the finances of the Conval district. Is Deb leaving because she doesn't want me to volunteer? Since I know you know how to do books. Anyway, so thank you for coming out tonight. The format will be, Gail will present what we have worked on to date, and then our Temple School Board representative, Jim Kingston, will talk about what's going on at the district level. He will talk about Dublin and Francistown and their feasibility study. He'll also discuss the proposed high school and CTE upgrades. And he'll also talk about some of the changes coming down from the state, federal, mostly state, that are mandates. So please welcome Gail Cromwell.
Thank you all. I want to tell you how this all came about. It must have been last May after the vote where all of the 4 towns that vote was negative. There was a meeting in this room and people didn't really know what to do. This was before we existed. There was some people said maybe we ought to talk about withdrawal. Some people were talking about costs. We didn't really know what we should do. Well, a committee was formed after that, which became the group of us. And so we did not feel that there was a real strong push for withdrawal. So we said, what can we do usefully? And the answer in my case was, let's see what we can do about costs. At least that would help not only us, but also help the district as a whole. Now, if you look at the back page of the handout that you have, what I would like to do is to go through the data to show you where Temple stands among the other Conval towns. What we have here on this sheet is the actual tax rates, which I got from the Department of Revenue Administration, which show the total rate. If you look down at the bottom, Temple's total rate is $15.99 per thousand. That's what that is. If you compare that going up to the other town rates, we're among the lower of the rates. The school portion of that is $11.42, which is 71% of our total tax rate. That's a lot. Compared to the other towns in the district, you can see that only Sharon equals us with 71%. That means that if you have a $10,000 tax bill, and some of us do, 7,000 of it goes to the schools and the other goes to the town. So that's a problem for some of us particularly. The enrollment that we have for Temple is 116 students right now. In the past, we've had as many as 200. Right now, we have 116. We have approximately 35 in Temple Elementary School. Going across, you will see in dollar terms what we have to pay. And we pay it in two different tax rates. We pay it in a tax rate set, what they call the local rate, and then we have to pay the state education tax. Add it together and you get the total school. So right now, this coming year, we will be paying $3,399,000 to Conval. That is a per student rate of $29.03. If you look at how the per student rates vary among the towns in the district, you will see that Dublin has the highest rate, $36,000. The second highest was Hancock with 31,000. Then after that, 30,000 with Francistown, and we're fourth with 29,000. We don't actually pay per student because the formula is based on per student enrollment plus the amount of property in the town. So that the net result is actually what you pay, which is the rate, which in our case is $15.99. What I wanted you to see, however, is how the amount that we have been paying to Conval has changed over the last 5 years. In 2020, we were paying 2.9, then it fell slightly to 2.7, back up to 2.9, then 2.9, and then this year, 3,399,924. That's a 15% increase. If you are bothered about why your tax rate went up this year, and I know a lot of us are, that's one of the big reasons why it went up, okay? Can I answer any questions? Is this all pretty clear? So in other words, these are key facts. Dublin, for example, said, we can't stand paying $36,000 per student. That was the total reason why they wanted to withdraw. For Francistown cared more about the threat to their school. They said, we don't care about the cost. What we care about is the threat that we will lose our elementary school. And Jim, who is here, who is on the school board, will speak to this a little bit in greater detail. We had hoped to have Laura Mafera here from Francistown, but she came down with a sick child. We know how that all is, so she can't be here. So there were reasons why Francistown decided to withdraw. Yes, Matt? Can I?
That no worries. Can we tag that 15% increase to anything specific? But do we know why it went up?
No,
by
I
15?
don't. I don't know why. I haven't really figured out the budget. Maybe Jim could explain to us why the budget went up that much. But it was a substantial increase. And I don't know what the future will hold. I mean, I know that they're talking about that $44 million bond, which should be scaring all of us, you know. So, and Jim will speak to that later in the meeting, okay? So that is indeed the problem, okay? Yes, ma'am. Did you have a question?
Yes, I was just wondering, I think I read in an article in the Ledger, I don't know if it's a couple of months old, but that Dublin mentioned about, because they have higher valued houses and stuff, homes and property
Yes, they
there.
have a very high property tax base. That's why their rate turns out to be low. Pam and I went to talk to them, and they were complaining about how high their per student cost was. And we said, wait a minute, look at your rate. What you're actually paying, $17.99 is their rate, which is certainly not the highest one in the district. I mean, if you want to look at it, to tell the truth, Peterborough pays a good bit of the school district. You know, that's why they're always wanting to save money and get rid of us and this and that. So anyway. There is a preschool. There are 4 towns with preschool.
Three
Yeah,
schools,
three preschools. Okay, so
not three.
these are the basic set of facts that you can keep in mind for where Temple stands in the great scheme of things among the Conval towns. So Since we did not feel that there was a strong push for withdrawal on our committee,
Gail?
we decided to focus instead on trying to figure out costs. And to tell the truth, I've been preoccupied on all my town committees. So when I started looking at enrollment for the schools, I was honestly shocked to find that the high school is only 55% full. What in the world is going on here? You know, they were complaining about our towns, not our schools not being full, and we're apologetic about it. Whenever we go to a meeting and they say, well, look at, you're complaining about how underutilized the high school is and so forth, and we do complain about that. We can't do that much about our school because every time they bring that up, we say, look, we're not going to put a 5-year-old kid on a bus for 3 hours a day, which is not going to do it. And then they understand how that can be a rational point of view. So let me tell you then what we decided to do. We started looking at how we have 3 main big schools in the district. Prismatic did not apparently pay any attention whatsoever to all of them. All 3 of these schools are underutilized. If you look at page 3, you will see in your handout how that is the case. What you have there is the high school is at 55% of capacity. It was built for 1,200 students. It has 658. It was more comfortably suited for about 1,000 kids. So whatever it is, it's still underutilized. The 2 other schools, both Great Brook and South Meadow, are also at far less than capacity. You can see the numbers there on there. So the first idea that we had was, why, since the high school is our best building, why don't we fill it up, for heaven's sakes? So our idea then was, let's take 7th and 8th grade and move them into the high school. And this can be done by separate wings, keeping the schools separate. We've learned since then that schools around us, for example, Conant in particular, they already do this. Every district in this town in this state has enrollment, which is falling. And so they got to do something about their empty buildings. So Conant has grades 6 to 12 in essentially their, what they call if you look at the outside of their building, it's called middle high school. That's also true in Hopkinton, for example, too. So there's a lot that can be learned about moving 7th and 8th grade up into the high school. We decided not to move 6th grade. That could happen in the future if that worked out. So moving 7th, now let me say a word about what the future is really too. There is a highly respected group called the New England Schools Development Council, and they project enrollment. I've been watching them for years, and they're very accurate. They say enrollment is not going to turn around. It's a false idea to expect that enrollment is going to increase further in the future. And in fact, if you look at our enrollment, you will see, as I point out in our report here, if you look at grades 5 to 8, they are going to be grades 9 to 12 in the high school in the next 4 years. That's a drop of another 100 students in the high school. So this is a problem that is going to keep existing. So it isn't such a dumb idea to try to move 7th and 8th grade into the high school. We also believe that it could have some very strong educational benefits, because right now in any given grade, there are children who would profit from being in a higher up class. That would make it easier for them to do that. So educationally, this could work out to be very good. Now, having moved 7th and 8th grade into the high school, you've got some changes that we can have happen in the 2 middle schools. In particular, if you look at Peterborough Elementary, we can move that entire school into the South Meadow School building. Plenty of room there for them. This has the additional advantage that the Peterborough Elementary School, which is valued at $6 million, could be sold. That should delight Peterborough, because then they can build 1 million houses up there and get a lot more tax revenue. So that's an idea that could be beneficial to both Peterborough and to the district, because the district would then have whatever they can sell that building for to distribute back to our towns, use for expenses and so forth. So put Peterborough Elementary into the South Meadow School building. going the other way. Yes. I'm sorry, say it again. Oh, the upkeep, yes. The upkeep on Peterborough Elementary School is fairly substantial. If you look at the budget for it, it's like $500,000 or $600,000 a year before any student walks in the building. Now, Antrim. Now you've got Antrim Elementary, which you could move right into the Great Brook building. Plenty of room. Wouldn't even fill it up. It's only 126 students in the Antrim Elementary building. That has the benefit of allowing you to get rid of the Antrim Elementary building, which is a very old building. Oh, thank you.
Ask and you shall receive.
It takes a whole committee to run one of these things. So, thank you. So, take all of Antrim Elementary, put them into the Great Brook building. Get rid of the Antrim Elementary building, which is one of our oldest buildings in the district. A major benefit to expenses for the district. We believe that this is only the start, really, of what you could find in savings throughout the district. That would just be the beginning. Now, right now, the town of Antrim has an agreement to use the gym, which is in the Antrim Elementary. They can start using the Great Brook gym there. So that's not a problem. They use it for their recreational programs. So all of these things can be worked out. When we went to the Selectmen's Advisory Committee meeting and suggested a few of these ideas, their first reaction was, well, the desks won't fit. They'll be too small or too big. I would say that the Conneaut Valley School District has an extremely talented director of the physical facilities. He can make anything in the world fit. I'm not bothered by that at all. So the advantages of our program are you get rid of 2 buildings right off the bat, save a lot of money. We believe that, we all know that there is a possibility now of rearranging the administrative positions. Administrators are everywhere in Conneaut Valley. I think it's time to really start seeing what could be done there. If we could just get the school board to focus on what could be done to save money, reorganize the school district and make it better. Now, we decided not to take the 5th and 6th grades out of the 2 middle schools because of the shock to the towns. When we went up and talked to the school board, I should say, the select board, told our committee, you have to go and talk to both Antrim and to Peterborough to tell them what your plan is and get their reaction. We did that. We went up there and did that. We also went to Bennington and Peterborough, Hancock, and so forth. It was very interesting. They were interested in everything we had to say. I think there was some pessimism that anything would ever be done, but you never can tell. You got to get this thing started somewhere. But anyway, it occurred to us that in the case of Bennington, for example, they have been sending their children to Great Brook for years and years and years. So we said, okay, to avoid the shock to those towns, leave 5th and 6th grades in the middle schools. So then Great Brook would continue to have 5th and 6th grade for those towns that feed into there, which would be Antrim, Bennington, Francistown, and what's another one? Hancock. Okay, so then the same is true for South Meadow. Leave the 5th and 6th grades in the South Meadow building for those towns that have been feeding into there. There are obviously other possibilities. We could send 5th grade back to the local towns. 6th grade could, in the future, move into the high school. So these are ideas that are just the beginning of what could be done if we could just get the school board to really think about it. The interesting thing, and we have printed out Article 5, which is of the Articles of Agreement, which indicates that all of this can be done without anybody voting on it. The articles say, you can do this. And so it could be done. In fact, if they wanted to move the Antrim Elementary into the Great Brook building next week, they could do it. All it would take would be a vote of the school board to do it. I don't expect they would do that, but maybe next year is a possibility. So this was the kind of thing that we focused on in our report. Can I answer any questions about it? Yes, Debbie?
So you have in this paper that Antrim has an agreement with the school district to use the gym.
I beg your pardon?
Antrim has an agreement with the school district to use the gym at the elementary
Jim
school.
Kingston is our school board rep.
Okay.
Bless him.
Oh.
Okay.
Well, no, my question is, when we did all the renovations in the mid-90s, built the new elementary schools and did renovations
Yeah,
to the elementary schools. Jim wasn't here at the time.
yeah.
We spent a lot of money as part of the renovation for Antrim redoing that gym. And yet now it says there's $100,000 in repairs that needs to be done. Why would that be?
Well, the Antrim gym has no foundation. Right now, it needs $100,000 in repairs. Was that the question?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm asking why, when we spent a ton of money on it
I wouldn't spend
20
it.
years ago.
For
We-
me, I would go in there and raise the
Yeah.
building down.
but we spent money on that school
We
when
did.
we renovated the
And we continue
schools.
to spend money every year on it. It's crazy.
I
So,
will- I
yeah.
will say that the rec department in Antrim uses the gym
the gym,
in the elementary school.
right.
So,
They could easily use the one in the Great Brook building just
Exactly.
as well.
um,
Yeah.
but
Okay.
right now, that's where the
Are there
rec
any other
department is
questions that I
functioning.
can answer. Our plan now is to turn it over to Jim Kingston, our present school board rep, and let him talk about the feasibility study that both Francistown and Dublin went through. And because that's the kind of question that we would have to entertain if you all decided, the town decided, we can't stand this anymore, we need to withdraw, okay? That is why we are having this forum, to explain what we have done, but also to ask the question, what does the town of Temple want to do? You know, that's a real question. I've actually been thinking about this for a couple of years, and I happen to know that Mason, for example, has its own elementary school, which is K-5, and then it tuitions into Milford, which in many ways is a very good school district, possibly even better than Conval. They formed their own SAU. So the Mason Elementary School is, I think it's SAU 85 or something like that. So that's one of the things you'd have to do. Okay, so Jim, I'm going to let you answer all these questions about what's next. Okay.
Thank you, Gail. And I think the school study committee has done a really good job looking at alternatives, beyond the withdrawal option at ways to save money. And I appreciate the input that we've received from them. So 2 towns did decide to go the withdrawal route, as you well know, I'm sure, Francistown and Dublin. Last March, both those towns voted to initiate the withdrawal process by starting a feasibility study run by the district, had a representative on it from each of the 9 towns, plus a select board member from each of the 9 towns. So if a committee of 18 can accomplish anything, you let me know. But it was interesting. If Bill Azell were here, he'd tell you that they spent the first 6 months, basically, of the 5 months of the process getting about nowhere before we finally got some traction and started getting some numbers to come up with what it really meant. Was it feasible for these towns to withdraw? In the end, I'm less than satisfied with the numbers that we ended up with, because they were kind of wishy-washy numbers, and we don't have what I considered good numbers for what would happen at the SAU level. Which brings me to the withdrawal process. When they voted to withdraw, they vote to withdraw from the district. They don't vote to withdraw from the SAU. That's a separate process. So what they now do is they withdraw from the district, and their towns become their own school districts, but they are all under a multi-district umbrella of SAU 1 yet, which is the current Conval SAU, School Administrative Unit. The SAU told the withdrawal committee that the costs of administering 3 separate districts would go up substantially. So that's influencing some of the numbers, right? But even with that substantial increase in SAU costs, they are stating that they now have to maintain 3 sets of books. They're responsible for essentially providing curriculum to 3 different districts, which may have different wants and needs, for handling all the teacher training in 3 different districts, all of those kinds of things, special education coordination across 3 different districts, transportation across 3 different districts. Not that it's paid for by the SAU, but they have to administer it. If you look in the RSA, there are a bunch of services that the SAU has to provide. And yeah, I can see it costing a little bit more, but not the numbers that they put out there. Okay. So like I said, I'm less than satisfied with the numbers I have seen on that. So
Alan.
hang on.
May I ask the question, if possible, of why is it also the wealthiest towns in the school district trying to withdraw from the school district that also predominantly better off old retired people than working class folks with children?
Well, I think you answered your own question in the case of Dublin, at least, right? That Dublin is property rich, if you look at their assessment, and they don't have a lot of children. And as a result, they're paying 30 some odd $1,000 per student to go to Conval, compared to other schools, other towns, which are paying considerably less per student. And we can debate the fairness or unfairness of that, but the fact of the matter is that the apportionment methodology that's enshrined in the Articles of Agreement is that 50% of the assessment is based on the evaluation of the town properties, all the properties in town, and 50% of it's based on the number of students that go from the town that go there. That's in the Articles of Agreement. Without a 2/3 majority, you're not going to change that. Okay?
If I remember the RSA correctly, if it's a multi-district SAU, the SAU then has to break out their costs, and it would be much more transparent what it costs. Is that not correct?
I'm not sure what you mean by break out their costs.
They have to break out the costs of what it is for each school district. Instead of, right now it's one district, they can hide a lot of costs
Yeah,
that may be not needed.
this is true. I mean, it does, and then it would get scrutinized by the people of each town much more transparently, I guess, right? So, yeah. So back into the process. So after all the running around and getting numbers and figures and figuring out that indeed, even by this withdrawal committee's own math, Francistown and Dublin would both be paying less if they broke out their own elementary schools as their own districts and tuitioned into Conval than they do now as members of the Conval district. So
Can
it
you-
is
Jim,
certainly.
can you explain the tuitioning in, what that covers?
Tuitioning in and the assumption, and this is all assumptions, this would all have to be negotiated if the withdrawal process moves through the next stage. But the going in assumption is that the tuition rate would be the state average cost per student to attend Conval today, which is about $25,000. That's about 5,000 above the state average right now. But $25,000 per student is what Francistown and Dublin would be paying for their students to go in. If there were special education requirements, they would pay the actual cost above and beyond the 25,000 for any special education student that went in. Okay. Let me get through the process and then I'll come back. So I want to get to where we're at. So after the withdrawal committee did its work, the withdrawal committee voted not to recommend the withdrawal of either Francistown or Dublin from the district. Surprise, surprise, right? Those towns were able to submit what was called a minority report to the Department of Education. And the minority report for both Francistown and Dublin were accepted by the Department of Education. So the Department of Education basically said, your evidence that it is both feasible and suitable for you to withdraw from the district is far above the majority's evidence that says it wasn't feasible or suitable. We're going to put it to the voters now in March. So in March, you will see warrants on the district ballot for the withdrawal of both Francistown and Dublin individually, right? If that, in that ballot, if the citizens of Francistown or Dublin, either of them, do not vote in majority for their town to withdraw, then it's done. Their town doesn't withdraw. If they do vote in the majority, then they look at the votes of the entire district across the board. And if across the board, there is a majority that votes for it, then absolutely, they're gone, right? Boom. In 2026, they're out of the district. They get a year to get their act together, do all the negotiating before they're officially gone. If the majority of the district votes against it, then they go and they look at the town vote again and say, did you have a 60% supermajority saying you want to withdraw? If they do, then they go back and look at the district vote again and say, was it a 60% supermajority saying, no, you have to stay? So if the town votes a supermajority to leave, it takes a supermajority of everyone to override that and tell them to stay. Right? They have to stay. So there are a couple of ways that things can go from here. Right? Now, the important thing to us, I guess, is what's it mean to us? And it will have an impact. There's no doubt about it. Let's see. All I can do is look at 2024 numbers because that was the latest ones that were in place when we did the math on this. And in 2024, now I'm going to look at the impact if both of those towns leave. And you can assume it will be about half of that impact if only one of them leaves, right? So in 2024, Temple paid 6.44% of the district budget. And that was about 3.4 million. Gail, we matched 3,999 or whatever. Right? So we paid about 3.4 million raised through property taxes in 2004 that went to Conval. Now that included both the SWEPT, the state part of the taxes, as well as our local taxes, but it was about 3.4 million. So if we use that same baseline budget of $56.4 million for the district, if Francistown and Dublin were to leave, our portion would go from, the 6.4% to 7.9% of the district budget. But that budget would go down about $9 million. But the SAU costs would go up. And I'm having to use the numbers that we were given. I don't like them, like I said. But the SAU cost is about $2 million. But that would be at the old 6.4% rate because both Francistown and Dublin are included in that overall. So in the end, we would end up paying about 3.86 million, or up about $230,000, $228,000 for the town's assessment. And based on our 2024 equalized value of almost $217 million, that's about $1.05 per thousand that your taxes would go up with both Francistown and Temple leaving the district. Okay. Or Dublin, yeah. Yep. Yeah, they would go down about $9 million. Yeah. And that includes getting rid of all the specific cost of those elementary schools and taking in the tuition dollars for the middle schoolers, high schoolers into the district. Yeah. So we get about $9 million for the remaining towns that wasn't there before, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, yeah. So there is an impact, certainly. Taking off my fact hat and putting on I'm just a citizen hat. I don't believe anybody should be an indentured servant. And even though it's going to cost us a little bit more as a town, I can't deny someone else, the right to educate their students in the way that they want to. That's my personal feeling. That was Jim Kingston hat, not my school board member hat.
And a reminder, the reason that those feasibility studies came about was because those two towns did not want to see their elementary school on the chopping block again, like we were last year, or like the school board tried 2 other times in closing the schools. So by leaving the district, they own their buildings, they own their elementary school, and no one can ever take it away from them.
Yeah.
Unless the town itself decides they don't want an elementary school again. So that was the main precipitous. Dublin also had a question about the education their kids were getting, but we haven't heard anything yet that they're not going to tuition their kids into Conval. Francistown has said all along, we still want to tuition our middle and high school into Conval. So just a reminder why they did that.
Yeah, Dublin certainly is maintaining its options open and, is looking at joining Harrisville and others in going down to Keene for their middle and high schoolers. That's a long time on a bus too. Right? So, okay, other good news. So go ahead, Gil.
Jim, before you leave that subject, what could Temple do? Is it now too late for us to propose withdrawal if we chose to? I don't know that we're planning to actually send out a survey to everyone in the town and say, is this something we should be considering? So what would be possible for Temple if we said, well, maybe we should have done this. You know, now that we've seen what Dublin and Francistown went through, and it surely wasn't easy, but maybe we should do that. So what could happen?
Yeah, so I'm going to put my school board hat back on, and I won't recommend one way or the other, right? But here's what I've learned through this process, and I learned a lot through this process. If you were to vote in March to initiate the withdrawal study, that would have a couple of impacts. First of all, and probably most importantly, it would insulate you from the potential cost of a $44 million project being executed by the Conval District and the liabilities that go along with that. There is still there were at least 3 different legal opinions given to us as a withdrawal committee on the disposition of the school building and lands. Initially, it was the town is going to have to buy it at its market value. And that's the position that the towns, that both Dublin and Francistown put into their minority report because it was the most conservative. That is the most costly to them. And say, hey, we could do even better than this. But even in the worst case, and I have to buy this school and bond the purchase of it, then I still come out financially ahead, was their position. But anyway, there were 3 different positions. First, there was the you gotta buy it. Then it was no, Conval has to deed it back to you basically for free. Then it's well, no, we need to figure out what the district paid for those buildings when they were built through the bond process and any capital improvements to the buildings. And then we'll take out what the town had paid in capital improvements and for the bonds and yada, yada, right? It's all by the same, it was all through our district council, yeah. So ask a lawyer 3 different times the same question, you'll get 3 different answers. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah. So, sure.
So on the voting, the way you explained it, that the district votes, and if the district trumps the town, can they ever withdraw?
Can they ever withdraw?
Right.
Oh, yeah, they could start this process all over again this year
And then do another vote again?
and do another vote again.
But
and
then again, if the district votes
against
at a
it,
higher level, are they stuck within the district forever if that's the case?
there's no forever. I mean,
Well, whatever.
yeah,
but
I
year
mean,
after year after
like I
year.
said, they could reinitiate this with, we saw that in Mason, right?
Right.
When Mason withdrew, you know, it was like every year they were coming back because they got shot down, right? And then they finally got it to go through. And the same thing could happen here. And the DOE in the last revision of the RSA actually did make it easier for the withdrawal process by establishing this supermajority clause. That was not in there previously. It was just, you know, vote of the district. Now it's got to be a supermajority over against the town's wishes in order to maintain them. Yeah.
Right. And I guess the only question with that is you have Peterborough, you have Antrim, and they're the majority of the population. So again, if they're in agreement that we don't want these towns to break away, they basically have the power to
Sure.
lock them in.
Sure. They could.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's that's one of those gotchas of entering into these articles of agreement, right? Absolutely.
That-
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Right. If Francistown and Dublin are successful in their withdrawal process and we come up on the ballot in 2026, our numbers, our ratios are now different, right? And the same thing could be said about the closing of the elementary school here, right? That if Francistown and Dublin are successful in the withdrawal, the arithmetic changes and it becomes, more likely, should a future board, now that the existing board has come out and said, we're not going to do this, right? Well, that's we, the existing board. That doesn't mean that a future board won't do that, right? But they do have a presence on the SAU board, right? But not on the, because they are running their own school. They lose influence as to what's happening in the middle school and high school level. Some say they lose influence. Others can say the power of the purse and that $25,000 per student that they're giving you may actually give you more influence than one voting member of 13 on a school board, right? What's that?
I appreciate you, Greg.
I got them.
Just repeat.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. Okay. No, yeah, the question was really to about whether how the math would change and how difficult it would be to do a withdrawal moving forward.
And that Dublin and Francistown will lose a seat on the school board
Right.
and no longer have a vote on the school board at the SAU
Yeah,
level.
right. And the seat at the SAU is interesting. They're 1/3 of the people there, but they're not 1/3 of the vote. It's a proportional vote. So, if they have, it's like one vote for every 16 children, I think is the way it works out. And so that they represent. Mhm.
If Dublin and Francistown are successful in pulling out and we were to have a warrant article on for a withdrawal study just to be done, once they are out of the district, they could never vote on any of our district warrant articles. So, Francistown was huge in saving, as was Antrim, in saving our elementary school this last year.
Yeah.
Yep. But if they're successful in leaving, they will no longer be able to support us in that way.
Okay. Alan, you had a question back there?
I mean, it was more of a statement of the fact of the local education. I'm probably the only person in this room that went through the Temple Elementary School, which also leads towards the demographic of this area. But it is not like well defined of what is a bunch of mostly, for the lack of the better word, geriatric people that had the children go through the system of public education 20, 30 years ago.
Okay.
To go about people like my age of most of my generation is like, holy shit, we can't have kids because we can't afford housing. We can't afford living costs. We can't afford most things if you're under the age of 30 in this world anymore. to be having decided the future for the next generation, for people being like, oh, my taxes might go up a little bit instead of.
I empathize with your position. I can't fix that tonight. All I can really want to do is try and inform you as to where we're at, some of the things you're seeing coming up, and you know, be active, get your voice out there. Thank you for coming tonight
But
and
it's
speaking.
like,
And
you know, like
yeah,
I
let's-
went through the Temple Elementary school system and everything. When the new elementary school was built, I was part of the first generation of that.
Yep.
And like, we were that like bubble of generation. And then everything that's happened since has discouraged people from even having kids, wanting to continue that, and then like you wonder why the school numbers are lower when houses are like.
Jim, can we get back on,
$500,000
can we get back
Yeah,
on,
and I'm gonna get,
on
like, shut
subject?
off, so-
So I think we got another question over here. Mhm.
I had
Go
one
ahead,
too.
Clay.
Is there a downside to a warrant article in March to start the withdrawal study? It seems to me that it would give us some leverage. You said it would insulate us from that $44 million fiasco they're proposing. Is there, what's the downside to that? I mean, there's always pros and cons. Is there a downside to passing that? Because we can always not go through with it. But it seems logical to at least look into it.
Sure. There's certainly a downside on it from my perspective. I got to do another study. But no, I mean, I think being informed is always good. And I think the good news, even from somebody that would have to do this study again, is that we've developed a lot of the financial analysis tools that would make it a lot simpler the second time through. So. Right. Right.
Yeah, I was curious if you saw the petition warrant article put out by residents in Peterborough that came out yesterday on Facebook regarding the school district budget tax cap RSA that's newly implemented. And I'm wondering if you know any more about it. The warrant article, if any of you aren't in Peterborough Uncensored, is saying that there's a new RSA available that enables you to set a school board district budget cap, and they're proposing setting that at $29,000 per pupil cost times the average daily membership in residence as of October 1st. And it requires a 3/5 majority to take
Right.
effect.
I was just made aware of it this afternoon. I had seen an invitation that came from, I think, some folks in Brookline to the school board to go to a seminar talking about it. So I knew the RSA existed, but I haven't seen anything more than that on it. The wording that I saw of that particular warrant, I mean, I think in principle, I'm not disagreeing with the principle of holding a tax cap of some sort. There has to be some exceptional overrides to those kinds of things, though, because you can't always exist because there are costs that go up beyond inflation rates, right? And the way that particular warrant article is worded, I think it's ambiguous, and because cost per student has many different meanings in this state, believe me. So anyhow, yeah.
Jim, I have two questions. One of the things that you discussed, and I'm a little confused by it, maybe I heard it wrong. And I understand that if these two schools leave the district, they will no longer have a seat on the school board, but they would have a seat at the SAU. And you mentioned that the SAU had given numbers because the costs would go up because of the fact that they're now supporting, two other school systems. Why would those costs going up be associated to the entire district? Wouldn't they be required to pay those costs themselves?
No.
It's not the answer I wanted to hear.
No, the state RSAs require the SAU to provide certain services. And those SAUs are for all the districts in the SAU. SAU 1 would become a multi-district SAU, and it would service the remaining Conval towns, Dublin, and Francistown as 3 separate entities. And so the cost of serving 3 entities is more than the cost of serving 1 entity.
And that would be spread out over all the 9 towns.
And that would be set out, the cost of the SAU would be apportioned the same way that the cost of the current full district is apportioned. So 50% ADM, 50% property valuation.
Okay. And the other question I had, and I asked this earlier, the 2024 Temple paid to Conval is up 15%. Do you happen to know why that number is up 15%?
So I think there was an artificial suppression of the number the year before. There was also a large jump because they agreed for essentially an out-of-cycle increase in what they were paying the teachers that we all voted for, right? That, again, it was an exceptional time because of COVID and because of the inflation rates that we were seeing, and they were in a contract at a lower rate, right? So there was a big bump. That's in large part, and that in healthcare. Healthcare costs have gone through the roof. Okay, so where am I at? Okay, change in state aid for special education. This has been in the paper a bunch here recently. Conval's total budget in 23-24 was a little over $58 million. They had 15.6 million budgeted for special ed, and we chose to take an emergency withdrawal out of the special education trust fund of $3 million to cover exceptional cost in special education. So you can look at $18 million out of what was then a $61 million expenditure being special education. State special education adequacy was $838,000. And then because we had some students that were over 3.5 times the cost of the average student cost, and some students that were over 10 times what an average student cost, we got some state exceptional special education aid in the amount of $162,000, almost $163,000. So yeah, that's $1 million out of $18 million in special education costs that the state paid for. Thanks a lot. And that was 87% of what they were supposed to pay us. Next year, it's going down to 67.5% of what they're supposed to pay us. There's an RSA that outlines what the state is supposed to pay. And then but the way the RSA is written, it's of the monies available, basically. So if the legislature doesn't appropriate monies to put in the pot for the state to pay us out of, they pay at a reduced rate. This year, that will be at about 67.5%. George?
Jim, I've been on the SAC committee, the Select Board Advisory Committee to Conval for a few years now. And at the last meeting, there was some trepidation about going forth with this $44 million bond. And so the school board is trying to break this up into 2 units, knowing that one or the other might not pass. And by the consensus of other select board members, I think this is going to fail when it comes up for the election.
That's next on my agenda, is to talk about the CTE project. Yes. Yep. Okay. So anyway, we're going to get hit with some increase in our special education costs, or lack. Actually, it's a decreasing amount of state funding. So we're gonna see an increase. And admittedly, going from 87 to 67.5%, using the 23-24 numbers, it's not a lot. It's $36,000 to the district, but it's already, it's such a pittance of what special education actually costs that everybody throws their arms up in the air and says, oh my goodness, it's a decrease in state aid. Yeah, it's a decrease in state aid of $36,000 out of 19 million. Okay. So, yeah. All right. Okay. The CTE and high school, because it's not just the CTE. So when you look at the proposal that the school board has put out there, as George said, they broke it into 2 pieces, and there is discussion about whether to put it forward as a single warrant article or 2 separate warrant articles. The single warrant article, or 2 separate warrant articles, would have us create a bond for about $18.75 million this year. And that's for a $33.49 million project, which is the CTE and some renovation of the high school. I don't think anybody, I know myself, and I don't know of anybody on the board that doesn't think that CTE is a very important part of that high school. That having technical education and the opportunity to get the college credits and to get that foot forward for people that may not be going into college is critically important. And I look at one of our Temple members, Jen Kiley, and the passion that she has for that program and the things that are going on there, and I applaud her. It's an awesome program. But it's doing very well. And in a world of unlimited resources, yeah, great. Let's make it better. Let's do more, right? But we don't have unlimited resources, in my opinion. So, wow, that's a big project. And what it comes down to is that the CTE itself, that part of the project, is about $19.7 million. The rest of that $33 million is high school renovation. I think they just did a renovation of the whole gym wing, right? And that doesn't include the auditorium, which is another $10.65 million. Which brings the whole project within the high school, if you look just at the high school part of it, of $24.4 million of a $44 million project. So what they're calling a CTE project should really be called a high school project with some CTE. They've also told you in the flyer that you probably all received that the state would fund 75% of the CTE portion of the build. And the state will fund 75% of the CTE portion of the build, just like they'll fund our special education, if they have the money. And this year, prior to the old superintendent leaving, we were told as a board that we were competing with a prison and Milford and Conant and Messinic and Conval for the dollars that were available. And it wasn't there. It wasn't there to fund everybody at the desired 75%. The fact is that the state will fund you, and the RSA even says that they can fund you from between 50 and 75%. Historically, they have funded us at 75%, various CTE projects, but that's not saying that they will. And if the money's not there, they won't. So I'd be cautious about even the numbers that you're getting at this point. And if they don't, it'll be, I told you so. Right? So I encourage all of you to go out onto the Conval School Board website. The architect's package is out there. I'd say read it with a critical mind. When you see that they're taking a school that they say is designed for 770 some and redesigning it to hold 550 some and charging you that much money to do that, decrease my capacity and charge me money to do so, that's worrisome. I've already taken my school board hat off and I've put my gym hat on. But when I look at this package, I think it was approached from a what can we get standpoint rather than a what can we afford standpoint. I'd love to see some renovation to the CTE, but I don't think it's a project of the scope that we have here, especially with decreasing enrollment. So the board is, you will see lots of communications from the board. You got the flyer. You'll see more, I'm sure, between now and March when it comes time to vote. I'll be happy to come back and tell you what I think of the communications. But what the board is kicking around is basically, well, they started with 4 options. Do everything. Just do the CTE high school, or do the CTE and then do the theater later in a second bond. And then the 4th was don't go forward with anything this year. I voted for the don't go forth with anything this year. And, you know, we don't have time to get into tonight, but the budget is over $60 million this year. So the problem I see with this is breaking it into 2 pieces is a sales job. We're only going to charge you this much in an $18 million bond this year, right? And for that, you're going to get the CTE and you're going to get a high school renovation, and it's all this safety and security and, you know, yada, yada. And then we're going to come back next year and we're going to go for another $10 million to do the auditorium. Well, that may as well be one project from a bonding perspective. Just hit me with a whole $33 million up front and call it good, right? It really makes no difference whether they stage this with a 1-year gap between asking you for bonding. If they don't do it with just a 1-year gap, now the project isn't a $44 million project anymore. It's a 50 or 60 or whatever $1 million project, because I've done all the renovation on the high school. Now I got to tear it all up again in order to do the theater. That's just silly. So if you're going to do it, you do it all at once, because that's the least costly way to do it. They can do it all staged and through a nice project schedule and the least amount of disruption to the school. So that's my opinion on that. Yeah, so there is this, fear tactic, I think, of not going for the money. Well, and I look at that like, oh, it's a sale, right? Well, it's not a sale if you can't afford it. If you can't make the payment, don't buy the car. And there's also been different opinions given on how long it would be before we could get another swing at the bat at this money. The CTEs are on about a 20-year cycle when you come up for eligibility for state aid, state help in doing this, or they were. Now that project is ending, that cycle is ending and something else is going in. And when the commissioner was asked, point blank, will we have to wait 20 years to get back into the cycle if we don't do this now? The answer was no, we wouldn't do that to you. Now that's, one man given one person face to face, there's no dollars or legislation to back that up. Yeah, you're going to throw away a chance to have $14 million worth of state funding, maybe. But can you afford to take $14 million of state funding? That's the question I asked. Right. And I think the answer to that is no. And not doing something doesn't mean that the CTE program ends. We have a very successful CTE program over there. Very successful. They got, Jen Kiley was showing us all about all the various programs that they've got and how many of them are earning college credits and, certificates and ready to go out and be teachers' aides and whatnot when they leave the school. So it's successful. And then maybe they could put more people through the program, but they're successful. And, if you're doing well, can we afford to spend that much money just to do better? Right? We'd like to, and in a time of unlimited resources, the answer would be yes, but we don't have unlimited resources. So I think we have to pick and choose where we place them.
Is that used by the middle schools and everybody, or is it just for you would be at the high school level?
It's almost all at the high school level, I believe. And it's also a shared resource in the region. So Messinic and Conant and Conval all make use of that. And they also go into some of the surrounding CTE programs like Milford.
So that money you talked about for this district doesn't include all that the rest would be?
They don't pay for that.
They
That
don't.
bond, the other schools would not, the other districts would not pay for.
Well, my thinking was if we don't have that many children that enter the elementary schools and there's plenty of room at the middle schools, like who's going to be using that come? I mean, and it's not, I absolutely agree with you that it's the future and it's great. And seeing just what the kids accomplish is incredible. But it's a lot of money.
Yeah, it is. It's a tremendous amount of money. And I think there's almost a sheepishness on the part of some members of the board on coming and asking for it this year, but I think there's also this, this false sense of throwing away, hard work, and they have done hard work. It's not that they haven't done hard work in getting here, but I think they did hard work with a objective that was outside the scope of what these communities can pay for, especially with the cost of just your baseline budget going up. Without increasing numbers of teachers and without expanding course offerings, we're seeing, as I said, a budget that I know is going to be north of $60 million this year. Well north of $60 million. And that doesn't include the new teacher's contract that's that they're negotiating this year. I have no insight into what that is. That's done by an entire separate committee, is brought to the board kind of as a, this is what we did. Do you approve it or not? Kind of thing. So I unfortunately have no insight there to share, but I know it's not going to be zero, right? So, yeah.
Going back to the special ed, and, the state has taken, or school districts in the state have taken the state to court about student funding and stuff like that. But special ed is a federal law. The federal government is supposed to be funding a significant amount of it, and they never have. So why haven't not just New Hampshire, but the other states started going after the federal government to get the cost of special ed taken care of the way it should be?
Good. Certainly sounds like an unfunded mandate to me that ought to be, taken to the feds, right? Yeah, good question. Yeah, I mean, I do give Conval credit, that they're the ones that at least started the lawsuit against the state to redefine adequacy, that, especially in the communities we're in, adequacy ought to include transportation, right? A lot of things are left out. When you look at what they call an adequate, the dollars to fund an adequate education, I don't have them at the top of my head, but it's nothing, right? I mean, it's like $4,000 per student plus another $2,000 if you're on free and reduced lunch, and then maybe another $2,000 per special education student. It all adds up to, if you meet all those wickets, it's like $8,000, $9,000 a student, which doesn't cover the cost of education today. That's for sure. Amy?
Back when I was on a school board, special ed was mandated federally, but not funded. So it was up to have they changed it? That they have to fund it? That's never happened. First of all, thank you so much for these common sense solutions that I think most of us are looking at going, why haven't we already done this? As far as consolidating schools, moving grades around, making better use of the buildings that we have, rather than shutting them down, or, making better use of the more modern facilities. When they're talking about shutting down elementary schools and moving all the kids over to Peterborough Elementary, which is the least of our buildings, pretty soon we'll be building a new elementary school in Peterborough. So thank you. One step further would be to consolidate transportation. And instead of running 2 bus runs a day for elementary and middle and high school, let's put them all on the same bus. They'll survive. It's happened before. It'll happen again. It'll be okay.
That is being looked at, I will say. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Wilton does it. And the Wilton Middle High School has 6 through 12 in the building. Housekeeping.
We're definitely looking at what they call single tier busing.
Yeah.
Which, and I'd like to see it go this step further where it's a single bus, right? But there is some fear of parents saying, my first grader can't go on the bus with a high schooler. And, I don't know, when I was a little guy,
Yeah.
The high schoolers were the least of my worries. It was
Yeah,
a second grader that was going to beat me up, not
Yeah,
the 12th
pick-
grader.
pick your
right?
heart. Pick your heart. Housekeeping question. If Dublin and Francistown do withdraw, does the district still have to provide transportation to elementary, middle, and high school students?
Their district has to provide that. They have to pay for it. It is, I believe it is an SAU responsibility to manage it, but the payment for it comes from the district rather than the SAU, if that makes sense. So they pay for like management. You know, there's a little kickback in between fee, right? Yeah.
They would, so the SAU would be getting the contract for the buses, is that what you'd say? But then the fee for them would come from each of the towns?
And I know that's at least the case initially during the transition time. It wouldn't make sense to renegotiate a transportation contract. Now, whether that would be something that the individual district would be responsible for negotiating in the out years is something I'd have to look into a little bit more. But I do know that they have to pay for the transportation. Similar with special education, they have to pay for the special education. Any out-of-district placements, any therapy, those kinds of things, the districts have to pay for. But the special ed coordination and dealing with the federal government on the special education goes through the SAU.
Okay, thank you.
Jim, the bond for the Lucy Hurlin Theater renovation and the tech center. My understanding is it's a 20-year bond, and that the projected way it's going to be structured is that there's going to be a fixed balance due every single year over those 20 years, and there's an interest is going to decrease from year 1 down to year 3, down to year 20. And so my question is, what is the impact on the tax rate of Temple for the bond? And the reason I ask is because they had a really kind of a fascinating bond discussion last Wednesday night at Lucy Hurlin Theater, and they discussed it at quite some length, but I didn't get the details on how it impacts the tax rate of each town. But my understanding is like $1, you know, if it's 15.999, the first year it's something like 16 to 17 for next year for Temple. And I just wanted to, could you confirm that somehow, what the tax rate would be over the 20-year period of the bond? If, now, again, they said that there's going to be 2 bonds, a $19 million bond, and then a $10 million bond, 19 for the tech center. And then I'm almost done here. And then 10 million for the Lucy Hurlin. So depending on whether you combine them both for one bond or whether you did them separately, the impact on the tax rate, I think, would be interesting to know so that we could evaluate what effect it would have over the next 20 years. Thanks.
Yeah, I haven't done the math on that yet. And I know that they are talking about doing what they call a level principal bond payment, right? So in doing that, you pay the same amount of principal off every month. And so your payment decreases over the life of the bond. Whether that's smart or not, I haven't looked at the present value, future value money ratios, you know, because it really matters what you're paying in today's dollars, right? When you instantiate the bond. And I mean, they're talking about a 3.25% municipal rate on what would amount to be a $29 million bond over 20 years. That's, you know, that's $1.5 million just in principal if you combine the 2 bonds, right? And they would be a year after even if they split them and both are approved, they're both going at once. So call it $1.5 million in principal every year that would be going to the towns. And then whatever the interest on that is, and you got to figure it's going to be another, I don't know what it is, another, yeah, 3% of that, right? 3% of. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Well, I'm just curious.
So,
Well, I'm just curious. I think they threw out some numbers about the tax rate to every town, how it would be impacted. And I was wondering if you could get that information and provide it to us so we could get some
Sure.
handle on the 20-year picture.
sure, I have not seen that particular part of the presentation yet. So,
One more question? Go ahead.
One of the things that we might not be aware of, but we have a private school built over on 202. It was privately built by a wealthy investor. But Conval has to pay for the busing to those students that go to the private school.
You're talking about the public charter school, Lionheart?
Yes.
yeah, only kids in their town because it is. public.
Conval is responsible for busing those students to the private school.
Yeah, yeah. But they do get all the swept, the town of Peterborough has to pay for that. Only Peterborough children, I think, not everyone that goes there. And I am aware that those schools, the public charter schools, definitely take money away. My position would be that if the public schools were good enough, then we wouldn't have those schools. That people are looking for alternatives to what's being taught in our public schools today. When you look around this town, how many kids are homeschooled? How many kids are going to Montessori or, some other private school in this town? You could probably double or near double the population of Temple Elementary School if everyone went to the public school here, right? Well, people are looking for alternatives to public school because it has warped to the point that it doesn't meet everyone's needs. It's focused on lowest common denominator now, unfortunately. And yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. We appreciate you being here. And thank you for the turnout tonight. I know it was a lot of information. As Gail said, we are going to be putting out a townwide survey to try to gather more information from as many residents as possible as far as satisfaction with the schools, satisfaction, just the way things are currently functioning. And the school study committee will come back, and once those results have been tallied, and share that information with the town as far as a direction to go. And we hope to have that survey out in the next 2 weeks if possible. I know Christmas is rolling around here. But that's our goal. That's what we'd like to see happen. Also, there's a hot link on Town of Temple website under residents, under Conval School. And if you have more questions for Mr. Jim Kingston, that email goes immediately to him. So feel free to ask any questions you want. Oh, no. But again, thank you so much for coming, and we hope that this was beneficial for you as we move forward. Okay.